what is it that we're going to have to do to protect our environment from both the internal threats to climate activities that can prove deleterious, and also to the external threats, but which we depend on? We kind of seem to be in a conundrum. Yes.
Some of it is we're in a rock and a hard place.
Yes.
But I think, when you're small, collectively you're small, even if you put all of us together. I think that's all the more reason why advocacy is important, because we have the moral authority to be aggressive in our advocacy on this issue. The external threats from climate change, we don't contribute to global warming. We know that.
Yes.
The large developed countries who have made commitments and have failed to deliver on the commitments to ensure that the warming of the earth is lessened are not living up to it. They're engaging in our tokenism, and even when there's conversations about climate financing, it is oftentimes so complex and so intricate that you almost give up before you start in terms of your ability to access it. So the reality is that we have to be aggressive about this issue. For example, Prime Minister Brown of Antigua have talked about climate justice. We know who's causing the problems. We know who's suffering the loss and damage. It's the Caribbean. It's the Pacific Islands. The truth is, recently in the Bahamas, we met to have pre-COP 27 discussions, and what was startling for me is that the Bahamas had, still shots up of the hurricanes it had endured and the cost associated with the damage. For example, Hurricane Dorian, and it's in the billions of dollars. So the loss and damage is self-evident. I mean, it's demonstrable. So the question then is, islands that face this year in, year out, why should they not be compensated? When we know where the cause is, and we know who's causing it, and the folks who are causing it are benefiting from it because they're continuing to be richer and richer at the expense of small islands. So I think the time has come for us to be very robust, advocacy for justice. But it's not just climate change. There's a whole slew of issues that small islands, and particularly islands that are populated and governed by black and brown people in the South, have had to deal with, whether it's from slavery, which we're still struggling in 2022 to get even apologies for, the lack of reparations.
I was going there.
The climate change issues, what would have happened when our markets were opened up, and essentially entire industries were wiped out, like the banana industry. So I'm saying we could take up the offshore sectors. Whenever Caribbean people seek to innovate, to find ways to sustain themselves economically, we face threats from the large developed countries. It's almost as if there's a suggestion that says development is limited to the north, and to a certain set of people who either look a particular way, or speak a particular way, or come from a particular region. And when you say these things, it is not meant to be provocative, but it's the truth.
But maybe you're going to have to start provoking.
It's reality. So I'm saying, Miyamaki was speaking to the Vice President of the U.S. This week on the question of bank de-risking and what is associated with it. You basically have a situation where all banks in the region are heavily overregulated to the point where it's almost impossible sometimes to open a bank account here. But if you walk into North America, or if you walk into Canada as a Grenadian citizen, you can open a bank account in 5 minutes. In a foreign country. I've done it myself. You can open a bank account in Canada in a mall in 5 to 10 minutes. You can't walk into a bank in Grenada and open a bank account for days, sometimes weeks, because so much is required of you, right? The effect of which is that it pushes significant portions of our population into the informal sector. They have no bank accounts, they have no credit cards, they have no debit cards. They literally can't take part in the modern financial system because they can't get a bank account. And why? Because there's this assertion that there's the risk of money laundering and terrorism and so on. The biggest money laundering centers in the world are located in North America, in London, in places like Switzerland. That's the reality. When they launder money on scales that are unimaginable. Right? So again, it is this consistent...
Some countries' budget.
Exactly. It is this consistent pattern where you are in survival mode all the time. And that's where we have to advocate, because we don't have any other... We're small, we don't have armies, but we certainly have the moral high ground. And I think in an era where you have globalization and where technology is available, and in a sense the world is flat because everyone can hear you from wherever you are once you're on social media, I think it's even more incumbent on our leaders in particular, not just politicians, but business leaders, religious leaders, cultural icons, to speak and fight for the Caribbean civilization, because that's what we're facing. in the case of the Bahamas, there are people still missing from Hurricane Dorian that have not been found, to the point where the Bahamian government has had to reduce by law the period of time for the presumption of death from 7 to 2 years, just to cope with dealing with the estates of persons who've literally disappeared during the hurricane. So this is real, and it's stuff that people in the region face every day. So I'm saying if it's not the Bahamas, then it's Antigua. If it's not Antigua, it's Dominica. If it's not Dominica, it's Grenada. If it's not Grenada, it's St. Lucia. You know, it goes on and on. It's Barbados. So the reality is we are living with an existential threat, a threat that has been created by the developed world. And while we may applaud all the multilateral meetings, the truth is a lot of it is tokenism, and we still find ourselves having to claw and fight our way to be taken seriously, and for the world to really step up. And as I said, I'm speaking on behalf of the Caribbean, but there are lots of other small oceanic islands that face the same problem.